Greetings. Today we have yet another guest speaker talking about something. Nick, isn't it?
Well, Nick on Aquamagna, actually, yes. Yeah, I prepared a little presentation about main characters, like how gameplay and the main lead influence each other.
Alright, the old why do you keep talking about story, only gameplay matters thing everyone keeps talking about. Yeah, we talked about that before, but sure, let's repeat ourselves and elaborate for another episode. So we can link this to the people who keep bringing it up.
Actually...
Okay, so the Sonic fandom is hopelessly in war with several Sonic fan factions, and the whole it's only a gameplay can be considered as a weapon, a battle cry for the fans up in arms against the adventure era, implying story alone will poison and contaminate the entire experience. Yeah, and sure, it's optional and extra, like a Happy Meal with your fast food meal. Yeah, it's about the nutritions of your food, not a plastic toy. Although I'm not sure why you would be worried about nutritions while eating at McDonald's. Just like I'm not sure why you're worried about perfect gameplay in a series fueled by adrenaline and not perfection. But hey, whatever. Nevertheless, this is Sonic Dissected, a show mostly dedicated to exploring how amazing Happy Meal toys are, and this analogy is starting to get annoying. A reason why I feel justified talking about the stories of Sonic games? Well, repeating what I said before, a cutscene influences your emotions, making a victory or defeat more bitter or sweet. It energizes and gives us context to your tasks and makes the events even more spectacular. And again, spectacle is the point of Sonic. After all, speed is his main gimmick, and speed, as far as gameplay goes, is only used for adrenaline or physics. And as our friend Nick keeps telling us in his videos, physics are thrown out of the window in recent Sonic games by the eternal springs and automatic pinball elements that remove any initiative of working your way around the levels yourself. And even with colors bringing back to platform roots, those levels really aren't designed to use speed in its platform elements. Quite the opposite, Sonic speed makes everything more awkward. Maybe Lost World will finally implant speed in a way that enhances the platforming, but so far in the series, speed is only for excitement purposes. And hey, a good story gives that excitement some extra punch to it. Dodging explosions and fighting robots is cool, but dodging lasers and fighting robots to stop a madman from blowing up the earth while he's yelling threats at you through the intercom? Epic. A good story pumps you up. A bad story makes you irritated, and in that state of mind, you'll be enjoying the actual gameplay much less as well.
Not to mention making cutscenes cost money and time. Money and time they could have used for more levels or fine-tuned gameplay. So if potential bits of the game are sacrificed for story, it better be good.
Yeah, sure, of course. Anyway...
Also, to defend ourselves, I don't mind if there's no story, like a Sonic Advance or Sonic 4. A game doesn't have to have a story. But if it does, well, you get the idea. Besides that, this is a discussion show, not a review show. I like to discuss and explore how story works and influence us just for the sake of understanding how story works, where my opinion comes from. So no need to defend your game, we attack. A good game is a good game. I just like talking about story.
Right, so...
It's kind of arrogant and stupid anyway, dismissing the need to discuss something in a discussion show. Being offended we dissect Sonic's stories in this Sonic Dissected show is like sending a letter complaining that your sports channel broadcasts sports events. It's, well, arrogant and stupid.
And then there's the fact it's Sonic, a hero, an icon. He's more than just a placeholder, he's a main character, so...
Yes, this is exactly what I wanted to talk about here.
Ah! Oh, Chew, who's this guy?
You're kidding. We've been working on this collaboration for weeks. You've drawn me.
Roger, this is the guest we invited over to talk.
Oh, you're that chump who completely bastardized my name in that other video.
Let's hear what Roger Van Wild has to say about it. Well, people have screwed up my name as well. Or at least my username, not my real name. That must sting.
Van der Weide is my name. A rich name filled with cultural significance and historical grace. It means from the fields, because my ancestors were creatively lacking farmers on the field. A rich cultural, significant, historical graced field.
Anyway, I'd like to start the discussion by...
Well, the stage is yours. Go ahead.
Yes. Agency is what I want to talk about today. Sonic has agency. It's a word I'll be throwing around a lot because it's essentially how we measure the importance of the main protagonist of a story, and in this case, the importance of such a character in their own game. It's a little different in movies and books and other forms of media because, well...
When we watch movies, we're stuck watching a boring hero talk and do dumb things and waste our time. But in video games, we can skip the cutscenes and start shooting and killing everything ourselves instead.
I suppose. Passive storytelling or active storytelling. Here's the best way I can describe it. In a movie, just because someone is the main lead doesn't mean they have to be at the center of the plot or have the world revolve around them. All you need to do is make the character easy for the viewer to sympathize with. We see things from at their side, and that's the closest we get to ever interacting with the world we see on screen, their world. However, the importance of the main lead's role tends to vary in a video game. In the case of a film, the viewer is limited to being an observer of the events playing out. Try to imagine some strange, intangible, ethereal being from a plane beyond ours, comfortably watching everything you do from over your shoulder, but never really doing anything to directly affect what you do. God, more or less. That's the viewer's role when watching a movie. This is where your agency ends. But in the case of a game, this strange ethereal being can suddenly control your limbs and make you jump and force you to talk to people and do all sorts of things effortlessly.
Or brainlessly mash buttons that appear on screen, which takes that power away. Stupid QuickTime events.
But it also gives us a bigger influence. In some games, the player is still limited to watching a certain plotline unfold, but even then, they have the freedom to nudge the character along during the gameplay segments, while other games offer the player so much control that the player can wildly affect and change the ultimate outcome of things, or at least the course of events leading to that conclusion. It's what makes Mass Effect such a powerful, appealing game. You have so much influence on what's going on, characters who will survive and become allies, or die, who or what the main character Shepard is. It engulfs the player in the experience more than any movie ever could. That's what makes that game so interesting, such a piece of art in video game storytelling.
And then there's Mass Effect 3, trolling you by taking all of your choices from the previous games away and forcing you into one ending out of your control.
Well, more like 3 slight variations on the same ending, but tragically, yeah. All the agency you've been granted up until now gets stripped away at the last minute.
It's the nuclear bomb of video game storytelling.
But that's just one example. I really do get a little pissed when Hollywood bigwigs like Spielberg claim that it's impossible for a player to really care about the character in the game, that as soon as you touch the controller and push a button, any connection you could possibly have with the character ends.
He's probably bitter because his own story-based video game, The Dig, was a big failure.
The problem with his statement is, well, he's dead wrong. He has to be, because I have connected to characters I've played as, and so have many other gamers.
A video game can literally do everything a movie can do, except more.
He's probably thinking in arcade action terms, where you can go around shooting everything with no consequences. But give us the most bitter, the most tragic, the most emotionally draining Hollywood movie ever. And then make it interactive, give the gamer options and challenges in order to earn a happier ending. And you better believe you gamers start kicking ass to save the day. Heck, I chose the most boring ending in Saints Row 3 just to get the nice ending. A horrible sacrifice, I tell you. I could have had a nice, epic airship battle climax, but, well, needless to say, there's countless examples of gamers caring for the fate of those involved in the game, and their emotions affecting their decisions. Errors in Final Fantasy VII, to give an obvious example. Many of us have cried, have laughed, have fought for our fictional digital friends.
If anything, the fact we have or think we have an influence on our heroes' fates makes the experience more intense because there's always a risk that we may fail and let these characters down. It's not like watching a movie and knowing that no matter what you do, the characters will almost always certainly make it out alive without your help, and all you have to do is sit back and watch. If anything, I think video games have the potential to create an even stronger connection than movies because you aren't just a distant observer anymore. You yourself are pulled into the action. You become a part of that character's world. Anyone can just watch a compilation of cutscenes on YouTube, a theater mode, let's say, to make the experience more like watching a movie. Heck, this alludes to a very special game we'll be talking about later, eh? But anyway, does this make the game better, Spielberg? Is this more riveting than actually playing the game and having a say in what happens? I guess anyone who's ever had an honest, genuine emotional response of any kind when playing a game, whether they laughed, sighed of relief, or hell even cried, wasn't really feeling anything. Yeah, kids, it was all in your heads. That was just your poorly developed minds playing tricks on you, and you've duped yourself into thinking that you were somehow feeling something that you never really could. All because you pushed a button that wasn't just to change the volume.
Why are we even discussing this? Shouldn't it be obvious to any gamer that all people like Spielberg and the late Ebert who haven't touched a video game since Pong are out of touch?
That's the thing though. All of that said, I can see things from the other camp. On one hand, if you're truly controlling everything a character does, then presumably there isn't really anything they can do to surprise you. The character is robbed of the agency that they would have in a movie, and it is given to the undeserving player who, as an observer, has no business meddling in the protagonist's life. It's their world, their story, and they deserve to not have us, the observers, messing around with their story. That isn't our role. A character in a game, though, is completely at the mercy of an overpowered observer and has no say in their own story. Movies are meant to make such characters feel alive, a creature of their own, as something independent from the observer. But in video games, they tend to be more akin to a puppet tied to your controller by invisible strings for you to manipulate. I can kind of sort of see where people who have this mentality are coming from, even if I do still strongly disagree.
It's inevitable that video game characters are at risk of having no personality, and being practically just an extension of the player's good graces. Heck, some video game characters are specifically designed with that in mindset. With that in mind. Especially Link. Heck, it's in his name, the link to the player.
Yeah, that's why they invented this magical weird thing called cutscenes. Perhaps you heard of them? They take away our control over the action and turns the heroes to self-respecting movie characters. Problem solved.
But now we get to the interesting part. How to handle cutscenes in video games. Can you get a nice mix between movie scenes and interactive action? I mean, the easiest route to go is to have the game be one continuous movie and replace the action scenes with playable levels, like Sonic Adventure 2, for example. The gameplay moves the story along, and rarely seems to hold it back, making it one of the strongest stories in any Sonic game, at least cinematically. Other games, such as The Walking Dead, take it further by giving the player the power to choose what the main lead, Lee Everett, gets to say from moment to moment. In this case, it's a chance for the player to not so much relate to Lee, but project themselves onto him. Depending on what kind of person the player is, Lee could be developed as a warm, benevolent, patient, caring hero, or as a cold, unsympathetic git, or anything in between. Lee truly is the player, and all of his actions are dependent on how the player may handle these developments if this was actually going on in real life.
Does it have consequences? Just choosing responses when it has no bearing on the plot makes it tacky and pointless. Sonic Chronicles.
Yes, see, there is no clear-cut divide between a good Lee and a bad Lee. He's always the same person, but he doesn't always approach things the same way. He can't. And naturally, the other characters react to Lee's various actions in their own various ways, giving them depth as well. If you side with people, they will, in turn, become loyal to you. If you screw them over, they repay you in kind. It sounds simple on paper, but it's handled pretty amazingly, actually. All that aside, in the case of this game, I can understand people making the claim that Lee himself isn't a character at all, that he isn't his own entity with his own agency, that he can't really have any character because he doesn't do anything without the player's constant say-so. However, I still don't see it this way because all this tells me is that Lee is a complicated individual with depth and layers and all that because, well, so is the player, the real human being playing the game. He isn't scripted to do or say things a certain right way. He's a complex human being, more complex than a linear movie protagonist could be. And I think this is what makes The Walking Dead fun. There's so much going on that it works around the problem of a character having no agency of their own and needing the player's permission to do anything. And they can still surprise the player if the player is compelled to get to know the character and perhaps themselves a little more and see another side to them.
Besides that, apparently empty fill-in-the-details-yourself characters have been in stories since the dawn of time. Read the classic Moby Dick and tell me what kind of person the protagonist Ishmael is, what he thinks of certain situations, and how he could be present in every scene he's apparently in.
I got nothing.
Precisely. That guy is a complete blank slate. A ghost moving around in the story with no other purpose than to be a vehicle for the reader. Classic stories have done this from the beginning, so it's a practiced art and a genuine part of storytelling in general. Boom. Discussion solved.
And then there's Mega Man X. You have the arcadey action-packed Mega Man with the classics, and the full-on talkative RPG adventure Mega Man of Legends and Battle Network. Mega Man X's storytelling is an interesting variation right in the middle. It is no cinematic masterpiece given the hardware's limitations, but thematically, it succeeds. If anyone here has seen Eagle Raptor's Mega Man X Sequelitis video, you'll know exactly what I'm getting at. There are no full-on cutscenes and enormous walls of dialogue, just a few beats that introduce us to the themes of the game and the characters acting it out. It's about being overwhelmed by forces stronger than yourself and finding the drive to become more powerful and grow to become a genuine hero who can finally surpass and outstrip evil. It's brilliant how easily the mindset the player needs to be in to play the game and the actual story of the game are so close to each other. It's what makes such incredibly simple themes resonate so strongly with us. X wants to find power-ups and defeat the enemies, and of course, so does the player.
We're not gonna talk about X7, are we?
Nope.
Oh, thank God.
We're skipping right to Mega Man X8, a very swell game if I do say so myself. However, I don't like the way the story was handled very much. It's an incredibly simple plot that's really easy to figure out, which is just fine. I mean, come on. But the characters talk about the same things after every single stage, and it just makes me feel like the writers think I'm stupid or something.
Ha! X8 is nothing. Go play Final Fantasy Dissected's final chapters if you want your brain crushed into a ball by the characters repeatedly hammering the themes and simplistic story beats into your face.
Granted, I can just ignore the cutscenes and move on to the next stage if I want, so yeah, I won't deny that the story of a game does affect the gameplay, but I don't necessarily think it needs to or even should.
Obviously, there's RPGs and Ace Attorney simulators, and there's mindless shooting and racing.
That just shows the capacity games have to be pretty much anything. It's funny, but I tend to think that games that need story, like indeed RPGs, feel like work, a chore. You do mindless work to earn cutscenes. Mass Effect fans were disappointed because they did all that work, and for what? Games that are fun anyway, full of focused, straightforward challenges, shouldn't need stories, like Mega Man X.
And Sonic, I see where you're going.
I can still enjoy a game like X8 or Sonic Generations even if the story is silly because the gameplay is quick and fun and compelling. As long as I'm pressing buttons, it's just a fun game to me, and that's all I really need.
I don't think a modern entry in the Mega Man X or Sonic series could sell as much without a story or some extra presentation elements added to it. It's something we expect from a £60, dollar, euro, whatever game, like ordering a meal in an expensive restaurant and not getting any cutlery to eat it with. Sure, the meal is what's important and you don't get cutlery with your meal in a place like McDonald's, but this is an expensive restaurant.
Yeah, if you want a down-to-basic Sonic or Mega Man, downloadable content or a very low price tag are your options, like Mega Man 9 and 10 and Sonic 4 and...
Actually, that's not what I wanted to say. There's another simpler but still effective approach you can take with stories and main characters. Okay, you guys know Metroid, right? Prime 2, another M? We'll use those two. Okay, Prime 2. In this game, you have a clear goal. Samus investigates the planet Aether. She kills things, collects things, kills more things.
Then collect more things, then kill more things, then collect more things. Oh, sorry! Did I just spoil the shocking plot twist of 4 or 5 Metroid games?
Sarcasm aside, the story is simple. Maybe a little too simple for its own good at a glance. But I think it gives Samus a stronger presence than she's had in most other Metroid games because from the moment she sets out on a new quest, she, and by extension the player, is responsible for everything that happens for the rest of the game. Because however limited the capacity for the player's role in how the story proceeds is, the game by its very nature gives you the raw power to reach that outcome with little help from anyone else, to make it happen. Samus is pretty much the only person in the universe strong enough to have any hope of surviving the harsh environments of Dark Aether and curbing the constantly advancing Ing-Horde invasion. So it can't be helped that she has to carry the story along all by herself, and there's simply no other way. I think this is for the best, because it allows her, if not forces her, to shine as a character.
How is this unique to Prime 2, in regards to every other game in this series other than Other M?
There's two things that make Metroid's story so strong for me. One, Samus is directly centered to every event going on. Every choice it's made, every discovery that's made, it's Samus. It's all me doing it. I don't feel like a fool just doing what the game tells me to. I feel like the game gave me a mission, and I'm taking care of it by myself. Or herself. And yes, Luke, this is something that's consistent throughout most of the series. The second interesting thing is how, despite that we don't get any real cutscenes or stories, there's so much detail telling the stories instead. Sometimes the visuals, like corpses or traces from an ancient civilization telling untold stories and tragedies, sometimes simple movements and gestures from Samus herself, who despite not saying a word, still conveys an energy, a presence, holes in her personality that I'm allowed to fill in. It's not unique to Prime 2, but I feel it's even stronger here than usual.
Interesting. You know, there's so many people always telling me that Zelda games and Metroid have an amazing story, best story ever in a video game.
It is! Zelda rules!
And it always confused the hell out of me. Are we playing the same game? Kill things, collect stuff, kill things. That's Metroid, right? And Zelda? I always compare Zelda stories with my old homework task books from school. You know, you see a pretty picture and an unemotional text with no personality. It says, back in the 7th century, the ancients Macedonians did things blah blah blah. Now make assignment 1 through 7. That's how a Zelda story feels to me. Pretty picture, an unemotional block of text with no personality telling me Ganondorf did something bad to someone some years ago and blah blah blah. And now go find magical crystal MacGuffin thing 1 through 7. Yet, people love it. And that has to be the reason. Because of what you just said. Nintendo doesn't tell stories, it tells atmosphere. It's the atmosphere that the player has to fill into, to suck up, to inject themselves into, that makes it so popular. That people fall in love with this universe. But that's just not how my brain works, I suppose. I never really placed myself that far into the universe. I'll always be a distant observer. I'll always be annoyed that it took up to Majora's Mask, that it's the first time I actually see characters having, a dialogue and discussing the actual plot, rather than just some boring sage having an endless, uninterrupted lecture about boring ancient legends.
You know what? Majora's Mask is actually my favorite Zelda game, with that being one of many reasons. Anyway, rant about Zelda all you want, but Zelda and Metroid are perfect examples of a unique way a video game can tell its story by its own merits even outside the cutscenes, by giving us a strong atmosphere, an emotionally charged universe to explore, and giving us a hero who's directly tied to its plot and the resolution of it, tying the connection of the gamer and the protagonist, and the connection between the gamer and the story close together, seemingly without having to do anything.
Yeah, so that it's you exploring those caves, it's you making decisions, it's your body filling up that sexy, well-shaped leotard, and not some emotionally weak crying bimbo.
I wouldn't put it like that, but essentially yes. Even then though, Metroid and Zelda are different. For one thing, Samus doesn't have any other characters there to complement her. Like I've been saying, she carries the weight of whatever story there is on her own. I'm just trying to make a point that Samus is defined by her actions, rather than arbitrary noises. The whole reason she came here was to rescue some stranded Galactic Federation soldiers. When she fails to do so, and it turns out they were killed by the planet's local fauna, Samus could have simply made her way back to her spaceship, submitted a report, taken a nap while the ship finishes repairing itself, and been on her way.
Hilariously, that's exactly how the story goes for me sometimes. When I'm sick of Super Metroid, I just go back to Samus' ship. Oh, I broke my nail. I go back to my ship and give up. La 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 la. The end. And considering how light and superfluous the story usually is, my interpretation is as genuine as your experience of the events.
My point is, she didn't help out the Luminoth because she needed someone to repair her spaceship or because she expected a reward or whatever. She basically saved the people of Aether to be nice, and it shows what a strong character she really is. To me, this is what she's all about. I can't imagine anyone braving all the dangers she has and not going insane from it if they didn't have a big heart, and whatever motivates her to selflessly push through all the hardships she faces is passed on to the player, inspiring them to be strong like her and making them want to beat the game. It's a lot like Mega Man X's theming, you know? Watch this scene to see what I'm getting at. That scene where she mourns that random soldier says more about Samus' humanity than all the self-indulgent text in Other M combined. She doesn't even have to say anything, and I can see what a fine sympathetic person she is, just from the way she's acting. People defend Other M by saying Samus doesn't have any character in the games that came before it, but unlike Link, Samus has scenes like this that give her character, and viable characterization at that, because of how she's acting, how she's emoting. They say, Other M makes her more human. She's more than just a walking gun now. Sorry, but all Other M tells me about Samus is that she's a pathetic, fragile, weak-willed, easily manipulated ninny. Speaking of which, time for a favorite discussion topic of mine.
Oi, keep the spoilers to a minimum, please, mate. I have yet to play that game.
There's nothing to spoil. Some Space Marines tag along, there's the Ridley freak out. Oh, and Adam shoots Samus in the back for talking back at him.
Ah. Wait, what?
We're going to talk about how she's relevant to the story. Spoiler alert, she isn't. Forget about the stupid story and her behavior in the cutscenes. That's just icing on the cake. The game itself betrays Metroid. Everything. You're stuck following one linear route, your weapons are forcefully deactivated and only return during specific moments in the story. You're no longer in control. Samus is a puppet, commanded by others. Again, ignoring the cutscenes, just the way the gameplay has changed already makes Samus a weak-minded, barely relevant civilian. In most of these games, Samus herself is what drives the plot, like, say, Mega Man in his own game. In Other M, Samus doesn't really feel needed most of the time. The big, badass Space Marines running around the rest of the ship don't really seem to need her help fending off monsters. No one expected Samus herself to even come here, or even wanted her to. She doesn't really need to be here. Given the way even the other characters, particularly Adam, treat her, Samus just doesn't feel very important at all, so how can she possibly carry the weight of the narrative? Because Samus feels so insignificant, so do I, the player, and that's not a feeling the player should ever have in this kind of game. Now, I know I sound like a hypocrite given what else I've said, like how a player can just tune out a story and have fun mashing buttons, but what makes a game like Mega Man X8 different is that even with the story being out of my control, I still have a say in a lot of what's going on, and what I can do. I can choose which stage to go to. I can choose which characters I want to play as. I can choose which weapons I want to use once I've collected them, instead of waiting for some vengeful of fart's permission. Even with the story aside, the player still has a lot of power and agency because they can choose how they want to approach the game. In Other M, the player doesn't even have that. The player is given so little power over anything that they really don't have a say in what's going on or what they get to do. You're always being told what to do, where to go, and which weapons you're allowed to use. Samus becomes an ineffectual character, which defeats the whole point of her character. She's supposed to be the deciding factor that tips the scales, turns the tide, all that stuff. That's why you're playing as her and not one of the other characters. In Other M, she hardly affects anything. She mostly just watches other people doing things.
I would suppose that's the point. Going for the aliens route, make her overshadowed by the others, so that when the story becomes more intense, she proves herself better than the others. It's more satisfying. Basic story progression.
If this was a standalone story that took place sometime earlier in her life, maybe. But this is several adventures into the series. It's pretty much at the end of the series. So after all these adventures, Samus as a character doesn't make sense as the weak-minded, clumsy civilian who learns to stand up for herself during her greatest adventure yet. She's already saved the galaxy several times. Surely she must have already gone through this development sometime earlier in her life. Why not make a game about that? This is like if they make a new Duke Nukem game and make him the stupid rookie. It just goes against the entire philosophy of the series and the character.
You're forgetting the fact that previous Metroid games didn't have an elaborate story like this, or give us much on Samus' personality. So far as we know, this is exactly who Samus was always like.
No. Like I said earlier, even the simplest of gestures can show a little insight into what kind of person a character like her is. Even if there were hardly any cutscenes before, the way the games and Samus were handled before contradict Other M. This new story direction is completely clueless.
Like it's a reboot. Huh.
You don't need long cutscenes or dialogue to get a grip on a character. I find it pretty funny that Sakamoto tried so very hard and with such futility to make Other M feel like some big blockbuster movie. There's even a theater mode, which I alluded to earlier, which is just every plotting cutscene clumped together with little snippets of gameplay footage thrown in there to glue them together. Sakamoto, above all else, clearly wanted to make a movie rather than a game, like it was his dream project. Or maybe he had delusions of grandeur about elevating a stupid video game and making it high-class art on par with an actual movie. At the end of the day, though, what does this contribute to Samus's character? How does it make her stronger or more developed? What good does this effort to make this a movie and a game at the same time do? What does it say? A whole lot of nothing, that's what. Sonic just waggles his finger and taps his foot. Bam! Cocky movie star action hero. He didn't have to tell you how he feels about every little thing in his life in order to have a character. He doesn't need to tell us anything. He shows us how he feels. Unfortunately, Samus didn't have the luxury of idle animations in games like Super Metroid. Because these games never outright tell us what kind of person Samus is, this has left room for people to come up with their own interpretations. The general consensus has always been that she's tough and independent, with a bit of a devil-may-care attitude, but not too much, and enough of a gentle side to give her some much-needed humanity, making her an overall virtuous, dependable sort of person.
I more or less got the impression that she was some domineering brute, sticking it to the man.
Oh, here it comes, the typical man-hating Ice Queen extreme. Need I refer you back to this scene? See that? Oh yeah, Samus is such a mean bitch, isn't she? I'm sure that's why she respectfully mourned those fine boys, because she hates their filthy male guts, am I right?
I agree. Sonic fans who didn't come into the series before call us are... Wait, we're talking about Metroid. Look, fanboy alert.
Or I'm on it.
Ow. Sorry guys, I just don't understand how people ever got this impression at all.
Ah, the raw, hostile wilds of the fan world.
Seriously, what's their problem? Of course, because everyone inserts their own interpretation of Samus into the character, it's to be expected that everyone has their own theories. Though no theory's as asinine as...
You need another punch in the gob?
No.
Hey, at least she was effectively characterized in Other M. Sure, it wasn't necessarily good characterization, but at least she's some kind of character now. She didn't have any personality in the other games.
Yes, she did! Need I repeat myself? Scenes like this give her more humanity than any contrived, overdone text crawl, you daffy best... Anyway, Other M attempts to make Samus more human, more complex, I suppose. But it removes the intrigue. It removes us from our own interpretations of Samus. It makes her a movie character rather than a video game character.
The way you're ranting, you think she's a movie character from the same writers as that Super Mario Brothers movie.
You probably intended for that to be a joke, but in all honesty, yes. From behind that visor, the more flattering interpretations of her convey so much more without actually saying a single word. And that's all the characterization I really need. Now, I'm not saying she needs to be a typical silent protagonist, otherwise she wouldn't have any lines in my Metroid fan comic. Shameless plug. But what I'm saying really irks me about all this is just how thick-headed people can be. All I needed was to see a few scenes like that, and I could see Samus' humanity shine through easily, just like that. But for some people, unless some clown jumps on screen covered in neon lights screaming, "This is what kind of person you're playing as," at the player, anything less blatant than that just whooshes over their heads. I guess that's why a game like Other M even exists, because there are people in this world who just don't get the point unless you tell it to them in the least subtle way possible, leaving no room for interpretation whatsoever.
Yeah, Other M sucks, Metroid Prime is holy perfection, and I get it.
Then again, now we're talking more about characterization than agency, but I think the two go hand in hand. A character's agency is, to an extent, dependent on how they're characterized, as we've clearly seen all too well. Maybe not how much they're characterized, just how appropriately. Anyway, I think we can all agree that it's about time we finally got around to talking about Sonic, don't you?
Oh no, please, go off topic some more. We do that all the time.
Anyway, since I'm not going to be around for your Big 06 video, I'll just get this out of the way now. One thing I've always found intriguing about Sonic 06's story is how, in adding layers to it by showing things from other characters' point of view, they managed to create a side that's far more interesting than Sonic's own perspective. Shadow's story places him very, very close to the center of the game's plot.
No kidding. Shadow's the dude getting things done, learning the lessons, saving the day, being Silver's father figure. Sonic's just a drooling zombie helplessly running after Elise.
Shadow's closer to Mephiles, the true villain. His personal struggles are deeper and more intense and compelling than anything Sonic has to go through or deal with. We see some great character development between him and the other members of Team Dark. It's like the great Clement said.
But I digress. Booyah, but I digress. But he's the main character of this game, not Sonic.
Exactly, Clement. Shadow is the main character of this game. It's just kind of funny to me that a game called Sonic the Hedgehog sometimes feel like it isn't really even about him. The only way this could be more ironic is if Silver, who seems to have garnered even more contempt than Shadow, could somehow wind up stealing the show.
It's Sega. If there's one thing they love more than being horrible in advertising, it's brutally and senselessly replacing the main characters from each of their series.
Point is, Sonic is an ineffective character who doesn't have enough agency to drive the plot in this game, like Samus Another M. I wouldn't consider Sonic's treatment in this game to be quite as offensive as Samus's treatment, though. Actually, I would. But I'll just leave the rest to you guys when you get around to that.
Yeah, and thanks for making me do yet another Dissected in between my promises I do with Sonic 06 next. Compulsive lying will greatly increase my integrity as a discussion leader.
Anyway, I feel like a broken record. When it comes to Sonic, agency tends to vary from game to game, partly because the many writers always seem to be changing how they approach each game's story. But in terms of gameplay, well, like I've been saying so many times, what makes video games unique is the player's involvement. Sonic 3 and Knuckles makes the story almost interactive, and it happens inside the level, so the character agency is close to Metroid. Other times, a story is presented like an RPG with hubs and explorable places, and other times a story is presented as one huge roller coaster like Rush of action stages and high-energy cutscenes in one go like Adventure 2, however inconsistent the gameplay is. Sonic is an action hero. You want to be pushing buttons and making things happen. You want things to happen because of you. It's empowering. When you're just watching something happen, something that's completely out of your control, well, you just don't want that sort of thing to go on for too long or happen too often. This is what can make talky games annoying to some people. It's all about player input and how much they have. Is it no wonder people are opposed to cutscenes in Sonic games at all when we're in this arcade-minded, adrenaline-filled state of mind?
In the middle of a stage, sure, but a brain cooldown in between intense levels is much appreciated.
But ignoring slower-paced RPG-minded Sonic games like Adventure in 06, you can imagine how people are completely indifferent about stories in Sonic games, that they're not needed, just like Mega Man X. Perhaps a few story beats, but mostly gameplay.
Yeah, speaking of Mega Man X again, you focused nicely on the first game, but as the series progresses, just like Sonic, it starts to become more soap opera. Twists and turns, betrayals, story arcs. Sure, a lot of people played for the gameplay. But you can't imagine people start buying the sequels also to find out how the story goes, right? Even when they don't care that much for the gameplay. Mega Man X1 does an excellent job bringing the gamer close to Mega Man, so now I'm hooked. Gotta find out how it continues. Zero comes back. Oh my god, I have to find out how. Sonic, especially in Sonic Adventure 2. That ending, just massive. Drama, teamwork, sacrifice, it was a big ending. After that I wanted to play the next game to see where my heroes would be going next. Even if it was yet another Sonic Shuffle, or Sonic Happy Kart Racing, or the actual Sonic Heroes follow-up.
But it's about gameplay. Keep in mind, I don't mind an in-depth story. It's not like I don't want it there. I just see it as a nice bonus. A big part of my enjoyment in the Mega Man games in general comes from following the story. The gameplay doesn't often change much, if at all, but is consistently good most of the time, and the storyline complements it, making it a true adventure, a chronicle that just goes on and on and on, spanning many sub-series, and I want to see what happens next. It's a big part of why I'm so bummed out that there haven't been any substantial Mega Man games for a long time, and from the looks of it, probably never will be. Aside from Mighty Number 9... I want a ZX3, or a Legends 3, or an X9, or some crazy new adventure that comes after all that, because I want to find out what happens to this world they've created and the characters in it. Just that I'll never know drives me nuts, and it shows just how invested in a game's story players like me can easily wind up being. But like I said, it's a bonus. If a game like X8 ends up having a subpar story, whatever. At least there's still fun gameplay.
True. Look at it this way. Let's say we go to McDonald's, get ourselves a Happy Meal, and there's a fun toy in it, a part of a Transformer. Collect all the parts to have your own cool giant Transformer. So you go back to McDonald's week after week for a new Happy Meal, and all of a sudden it changes. Now there's a different toy in your Happy Meal, some stupid pig pony. So you're angry. You want the new part of your unfinished Transformer. And your parents can complain that it's about the food. The toy isn't extra. All they want. And yes, the hamburger may taste nice, but damn it, we feel betrayed. We came here specifically to finish our Transformer.
Which is pretty much how I feel about Mega Man, I think.
Yeah, that's our perspective with Sonic now. We got hooked as hell on Sonic's universe and its characters, tuning in each game to see how it progresses. And it progresses like a drunken rhino trying to control a brain with half its wheels missing, slipping on thin ice. And as we sit in the back train cart watching terrified how our train is slowly slipping and scraping towards an enormous cliff of deadly pink rocks and flesh-eating unicorns about to swallow us whole, Just like that, we sees the Sonic series slipping helplessly towards Sonic Music Note and Happy Pink Candyland as well. Back to the roots, huh?
Shame for you, but that's your problem. Sonic's problem is that it's so inconsistent in its tones and purposes in its previous games. There's too many wildly differing fans of the series, and where Nintendo wisely made Mario mute, he's always presented as an audience surrogate. Even if his games become story-heavy, he's the only character who doesn't talk in Mario Sunshine, the game in which everyone else finally has a voice, for better or worse. Sonic, on the other hand, is all over the place with no consistency, which is why Sonic fans are always at odds with each other, and why you get so many frustrated people, each with their own personal special vision of Sonic. Not because Sonic is mysterious like Samus and leaves the player wondering, but because he's clearly so many different people at the same time. And then these people send you notes that it's about gameplay, not story.
Yes, that is the one reason why we get people frustrated at us and Sonic fans are fighting each other. No other reason at all.
Well, the fact that each game works on a different level in your brain could be considered the core problem of the entire series, I suppose.
Ignoring the story, player input giving empowerment also works within the gameplay itself. 2 words: scripted events. Now, I'm okay with an occasional spring or booster giving the player a little push, but there are some games where you can't go more than a few seconds without touching something that essentially robs the player blind and forces them to surrender all control to the game itself for a moment, and it plays itself. Games that are super linear and only give the player so many options and ways to traverse Sonic's world, thus forcing them into more scripted events, also reduce the player's agency. This is something I tended to talk about a lot in my admittedly out-of-date Sonic reviews. I was always driving home how this game or that game limits what the player does, that there's too many scripted events and the player is always trapped in a hallway or whatever. But like I said, I don't mind a few of these things sprinkled here and there for whatever thrill people get from them. But the way I see it is, well, it's simple. The more of these we see crammed into a game, the less time the player gets to have actually playing anything, and the more time they spend relegated to the same role they'd have watching a movie, which contradicts the very nature of a game, particularly action-adventure games. The main reason I see the modern stages as a massive improvement over the daytime stages is because the player has more input, more decision-making. There's more space to roam around in, and the scripted events are downplayed, most of the time anyway. And that's enough for me, because with this spin on the daytime stage formula, the player is given much more control over what they do, or rather, what they're allowed to do, where they can go, and what they can interact with. This means they have more agency, more input, more power, and for me, that can only be a good thing, because the more the player is forced to do on their own, the more the gameplay experience is enriched and fleshed out.
Right. We didn't talk about scripted events in our video, did we? Not much, anyway. Yeah, it makes sense.
And playing Sonic after the sequel recently, I appreciated the idea more that when there's more characters in Sonic, they have their own story and accomplishments and are more than just a simple character model swap.
Oh, dangerous talk there, mate. Big part of the Sonic community hates the Sonic Adventure way of each character having their own gameplay and stories you need to go through.
Yeah, if you ever want the other characters to be playable again in the series, we probably need 1 or 2 games where they're just optional, differently skilled Sonics, a la Sonic 3 and Knuckles and Sonic Advance, before the audience accepts them as unique elements inside the games again. Although I agree, I like having Sonic spells be useful and having things to do again. But we're apparently still stuck at a grief stage of Sonic 06 strategy, so we're not allowed to remember that every single Sonic game for the past 7 years have been nothing but Sonic alone back to his roots stuff.
I know, man. I wish people could just get over 06 and forget about it. I mean, that's why the daytime stages were conceived. Because of 06, everyone was so afraid of Sonic Adventure-esque gameplay, of anything even remotely resembling it, so Sonic Team was compelled to make something that didn't resemble it at all. And it's only in more recent games like Generations and even Lost World that they're finally getting a little more comfortable with bringing some of the old design philosophies and whatnot back into practice. Back to after the sequel, though. Here's the last thing I want to talk about, guys. In Sonic before the sequel, you'd routinely be forced to switch between characters, like in Adventure 2, so they'd both have screen time and importance throughout the story. However, it's much trickier to make both characters feel important if you're only playing as one of them the entire time, like you're able to in Sonic after the sequel. In a lot of, say, Mega Man games, specifically the X and ZX games, you can choose to play as different characters and see things from their side. This is handled in a pretty clunky way, because you're really just playing the exact same game from their perspective, if it could even be called a different perspective. Sometimes they may face a different boss or something, but this is extremely rare. It isn't even so much a let's see this from their point of view thing, as it is a let's replace this character model with that character model in a what if scenario thing. Leg for Bird could have just taken the ZX approach with Sonic ATS all too easily. Just swap one character model for the other in the cutscenes to go along with the gameplay depending on who you'd be playing as, and you could see Tails save the day instead of Sonic. The final boss aside, I think. What I find amazing is how both characters are made equally important throughout the game's story, in just about every cutscene regardless of who you play as. It never feels like either is one-upping the other, and no matter who you're playing as, you almost always see them together in the cutscenes. They're both important. They both have agency and never at each other's expense. Isn't that something? We've never seen Sonic Team handle a game this way. One of my favorite cutscenes, one that I think captures the spirit of this whole game, plays at the start of Moon Mansion Zone. Tails is scared by what's ahead. Sonic mocks him a bit by acting like a ghoul. Tails gets scared by a real ghoul that's behind Sonic, who is bewildered that Tails appears to be scared of Sonic himself. This is a great scene because both characters are treated just right. Tails is scared, but he isn't the butt of the joke. Sonic is ignorant of what's behind him and acts a bit like a git, but just enough to prevent him from being the flawless messiah figure that the more recent games make him out to be, which is a problem that you guys have already covered. I guess I felt this was worth bringing to your attention because it shows that we, the fans, who have stuck with these characters for all these years, really do know these characters better than the series' own writers that change every few years. You guys are doing good work, and people are listening to you, to us, and it's just great to see works like this game bring these characters to life in the way we've more or less always wanted to see them. Well, that concludes what I wanted to say about Sonic.
Yeah.
I hope these were some interesting arguments about the effect story has on gameplay, and I hope they help you in your discussions with fans who hate you for discussing the story for whatever reason.
If they want to win a discussion we're having by just stating their opinion instead of actual arguments, I doubt they're smart enough to even follow these videos anyway.
Well, I see their point. The latest Sonic games are great with their gameplay and don't really need the story.
No argument there. Sonic Colors would be a million times better without its story.
But there's a story nonetheless, and as such I feel justified whining about it.
Fair enough. Good luck with your future videos.
Bye! See you all next time. And next time we talk about...
Sonic 06?
If nobody interrupts...
See ya. Wouldn't want to be ya. Toodles!